I have 7 o'clock, so we're going to get underway. This is the signal to Simsbury Community Television to start their broadcast or their taping. We'll call the meeting to order. And the first item on the agenda is public audience. Anyone who would like to speak, state your name and your address, and you're limited to 3 minutes. Mrs. Coe, welcome.
Joan Coe, 26 Whitcomb Drive. I know that every member of this board is aware that Joe Grace has returned to coach the Simsbury football team. I am sure that you are aware that during Superintendent Joe Townsley administration, there were letters from parents sent to the responsible parties in the high school alleging that Joe Grace had hit 4 football players during halftime against Bloomfield and other issues. Everyone was aware of the issues, and the Board of Education refused, in an act of denial, to admit that this behavior was reprehensible and removed Grace as coach. The student editors placed a coded message, and this is the coded message that they placed on the Jones bottles with Jones soda labels in the newspaper stating "Coach hits kids." The student editors writing for the Forum, the high school newspaper, wanted to expose Joe Grace's conduct and were not only censored by the staff, but the editors were removed from the newspaper to protect a coach that hit football players. Ken Krieski, a Hartford Advocate reporter, interviewed the players at Simsbury High School for the story. Only after the article was published in the Advocate by Ken Krieski did Superintendent Joe Townsley admit to Joe Grace's, quote, cuffing the players. According to an article in the Hartford Courant, June 10, 1999, Aaron Pomerantz was quoted as saying, and I quote, "During any kind of intense athletic matches, coaches will take it upon themselves to increase the adrenaline of their players. For some coaches, that results in spirited speeches aimed at firing up the team. For others, it means physical jousting. Coach Grace does both," end quote. Years later, Joe Grace has returned to coaching Simsbury's football team. The Board of Education has not removed Joe Grace from the coaching staff, admitting that hitting students was tolerable actions within the context of sports. Simsbury's football team has lost 47-7 against Southington, 49-14 against Hall, and 20-14 against Connor. It would appear that Joe Grace's coaching abilities have not produced a winning football team. His coaching style should not be condoned. I am asking this board to remove Joe Grace as part of the football coaching staff at Simsbury High School, and I will post my comments on www.simsbury.com, Simsbury Patch, and Simsbury.com forum topics. Thank you for listening, and I hope something comes of my talking to you.
Thank you for your input, Mrs. Coe. Always a pleasure to see you. Anyone else in the public audience? Hearing none, we'll go to Board and Administrative Communications, and we'll start with Brian.
All right. So we're more than halfway through the first quarter at Simsbury High School, which means that the thing on most people's mind, especially if they're seniors, is college, which is fitting because tomorrow 3 out of the 4 grades are doing pretty much college-focused things. For the first time, the seniors are being given the opportunity to have a day of college counseling through the guidance department, and I think a lot of people are really excited about having that opportunity to get a lot of their questions answered through this increasingly confusing college admissions process. The juniors and the sophomores are going to be taking the PSAT tomorrow, which is definitely an important part of the pre-college process, and the freshmen are going to be listening to an anti-bullying message, which is another very important message to get across. So, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Susan?
Nothing today.
Todd? All set? Mike?
I'm good too.
Tom? All set. Darrell?
I'm all set.
Quiet Mike. We'll start with Aaron.
Okay, great. And Brian, thank you, because I was going to talk about that. So it is an early release tomorrow morning, and just as Brian said, we have a lot going on at the high school. We're excited about the seniors this year, having the opportunity for those to engage in conversations with our guidance counselors at the school, but also some students might choose to do a college visit and or job shadow tomorrow as well. It is an early release, and so the afternoon is scheduled for curriculum focus focus on teaching and learning tomorrow. So all grade levels will be working collectively in their professional learning communities to talk about the work that they've been teaching and upcoming units, and even revising and editing some units as well. So that's what the afternoon will look like tomorrow. And I do want to remind the board that on November 4th, we have secured John Bergman, who's a national presenter on the Flipped Classroom, and he will be doing an hour keynote on the morning of November 4th at 8 o'clock. And if you're available and able, it'd be great to have you join us on that morning.
At the high school, right?
At the high school.
Should we let you know ahead of time, or?
No, I think there's plenty of space, so I think that's fine. So.
So it's been great to provide the board updates regarding our Community for Care group here in Simsbury, which is a collaborative effort between our schools, the police department, social services, and town government, as well as the clergy in the Simsbury community. And together with the possibility of some grant funding through social services, the Community for Care was able to produce this communication for parents around proactive resources for the prevention of alcohol, tobacco, drug use, as well as mental health issues. So these brochures, or they're actually more than brochure, these resource manuals were given out at the middle school and high school open houses. And these resources are also available here in our district offices, the main offices of the middle school and the high school, as well as town offices. So certainly we'll pass this around and make sure that you all get individual copies if you would so like. At our last meeting for Community for Care, our two SROs were able to present to the group around kind of trends that they're seeing in the Simsbury community. And that's just one example of the many great ways that Officers Cushman and Officers May have been an invaluable resource as our school community officers, our school resource officers. So Officer Cushman, I wanted to introduce or reintroduce him to all of you. He's our SRO for grades K through 8. So he is a very familiar face in all of our elementary schools as well as the middle school. We were able to collaborate today with Principal Luzetti on a lockdown drill, and Officer Cushman was out there and the kids were high-fiving him and knew him well, and that's such a great sight to see. So welcome. And thank you, Todd. The newer face to the board is Officer Tim May. So Tim replaced our former SRO over this past summer and has been a very welcome face to the Simsbury High School, already getting very involved in many of the activities involving our students. And, again, over there observing Tim in the high school setting, and has done an incredible job making relationships already with our high school population, as well as teachers and faculty and staff. So wanted to introduce Officer May to the board as well this evening.
Welcome. Glad to have you guys out there, and you have a very, very important role to play in our school system. You're highly valued. Your work is highly valued, so welcome. Glad to see you here tonight. Hope to see you here at other times, hopefully with good news.
Thank you.
All set?
That's it.
Burke?
Yes, just to continue on the theme of collaboration with the town of Simsbury, I just wanted to let the board know that there's been a lot of conversations and work cooperatively with Tom Roy, the Director of Public Works, Jeff Shea, the town engineer, Steve Twitchell, and myself. We've been focusing on areas to increase efficiency, cooperative efforts. Most recently include some a scope of work that is going to help us to look at our energy usage, and a third party that specializes in that is going to look at all of the bills for both the town and the Board of Education. And coming up in this, further in this budget year, I think you'll be hearing more about efforts to try to reduce costs. One of the areas that we're excited about is there continue to be energy incentives from the utility companies that we'd like to take advantage of. We've done that to a good extent in the past, I'd say 6 to 8 years. We have some even more quick payback items that we're reviewing now, and again, we'll look forward to bringing those forward to you to let you know what we're hoping to do.
On the collaborative work with Tom Roy, will you summarize that and take that to Board of Finance? I know that was a point that they emphasized with us during the budget discussions we had with them. It'd be good to report out in some detail the work that you and Tom have.
Yes, yes, I think we're planning to do just that.
Good. Thanks, Bert.
Sure.
Matt?
Yes, two quick things. One introduction in the back of the room is Brian Hendrickson. Brian is a middle school principal from Naugatuck and is in his 093, I guess is the certification number, superintendent's program up at UConn. Part of that is an extensive internship program. So Brian hangs around us and the team here and is at the board meeting tonight. He was with us on our morning meeting this morning, so it's nice having Brian here, and you'll be seeing him, and this will become a familiar face throughout the year. The second piece is some exciting district news. Jerry LaValle, who many of you may know in district, is a longtime paraprofessional at Squadron Line School. And last year, Jerry was named, we had put in a process, and she was named our Paraeducator of the Year. Jerry has now been named the State Paraeducator of the Year, so it's the first time they've had such an honor, and there's going to be a dinner and award ceremony that we're going to attend on Jerry's behalf. But we know that our paraeducators are a huge part of the student success here in Simsbury, and she is fitting. She's a wonderful person, a wonderful educator, and I've asked her to come to the next board meeting, and she doesn't like a lot of attention on herself, but I thought it'd be great to get Jerry here and just recognize her in front of the board. But really exciting news, not only for Squadron, but for the district as well.
All set?
Yep.
Okay, and I have nothing to add for communications tonight, so why don't we move on to recommended actions? If I can get a motion to approve the minutes of the September 9th, 2014 meeting.
So moved. Second.
Second. Any changes, alterations, comments, suggestions, edits? Nothing? All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Hey, guys, thank you.
Thanks, guys. And moving on, the approval of the minutes of October 6, 2014 special meeting. If I can get a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Sarah?
Second.
Susan? Any discussion, edits, et cetera? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Abstain? We have-
That was me.
Abstain.
That was same abstain.
So we have two abstains. And item C, which is Exhibit 3, personnel. Sue?
So this is just to inform the board of an appointment. No motion is necessary tonight, but we have a new social studies department supervisor at Henry James, Alan Admonson, who is going to be replacing Carrie Grotto, who's moved on to an additional administrative position, and just wanted to inform the board of that action.
All set? And item D on our list, approval of the educational specifications for the Henry James and Squadron Line School building projects in the 2015-2020 six-year capital improvement plan. Exhibit 4 in our package. Bert?
Yes. As you may know, we submitted 2 applications for school construction reimbursement grants for both the Henry James and the Squadron Line projects that were approved in this past budget year. So there are a number of items that are reviewed by the state, a lot of minutes from various boards for funding as well as approvals along the way. And there's a very particular step that they are asking. You see a draft motion, which is to amend a prior motion where you approved the projects as a part of the 6-year capital plan, but also to explicitly state that you're further approving the educational specifications which are attached for each of those projects. Once that is submitted to the state, they have to have that by November 1st in order to let us know where the applications stand in their priority rankings. So we're asking your approval and amended motion as you see here. If there's any questions on those specifications, I'm happy to answer them.
So moved.
Mike is moving the motion, and do we have a seconder?
I'll second.
All right, discussion or questions for Burke?
So Burke, the whole 6-year capital improvement plan has to be submitted to the state because it's included, right? That all the schedules with all the detail is included in this Exhibit 4. Is that whole thing been submitted, or just this one?
They've received all these documents. What they're being very explicit about is they have particular motions and forms that they need to see on
Okay.
a long checklist about motions for funding as well as approval of these specs. There were some about the Public Building Committee's charge, so we actually have a couple of items. This is the last one where they need it for the file to be able to
Check it off the list. Got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And Burke, you're up again for the second item D. We have two items D on our work tonight. Exhibit 5.
Okay, so we have a gift to the Simsbury High School Tech Ed Department. So it's actually, well, it's part of the same board policy. This gift is a donation of a 2002 Jeep Liberty, which is generously being offered by Simsbury residents Jean and Debbie Travato. It has a Kelley Blue Book value of $3,110, and it would be utilized for Tech Ed to give students more to work on in the auto tech program. So we'd ask for your approval of that donation.
Great use of an older vehicle, so thank them on our behalf. Can we get a motion for?
Motion.
Second.
Second. Any other questions or discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Here, you did.
Bert, you're up for,
Okay. We've got two technology gifts. The first is to Latimer Lane School from its PTO, and Mike Lazzetti is here this evening. This is a gift of 12 Chromebooks and a Chromebook cart, and then the value is $4,969, and this will help enhance the ability to deal with our SBAC testing and collaborate on projects. And we'd ask your acceptance of this gift.
So moved.
do I have a seconder?
Second.
Susan? Discussions, questions?
It's awesome. It's great.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
you
great.
very much. What a great gift.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. You're up again, Bert.
And the next one is another technology gift from the Henry James Memorial School PTO, and it is two different items. The first being 2 iPads for use in the art department, and the second is 2 what are known as Red Cat sound field systems. They make it easier for students to hear and drown out the background noise so that they can hear what's being taught. Those systems work for the whole classroom, regardless of who's in that room. And the total value of those items is $3,002, and we request that you approve them.
I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Any questions? All in
Again,
fa-
thank you very much.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And just a quick update, we looked at our PTO and CEF donations over a period of time from about 2007, updated them, including tonight, assuming that you were going to approve them, which you did, and we're up to $139,366 in just PTO tech donations, and for CEF, $27,280. At
Just
one of your
been
last meetings on
incredible
September
partners
9th,
over
we
the-
just
over the years.
received a nice gift of $4,200. Which we accepted. And the last gift item is G on our
Cultural
agenda, and that's the Cultural Enrichment Committee. This process, I think you're becoming familiar with, that this is our latest installment of funding from all of our PTOs to our Cultural Enrichment Committee to fund programming at all of the elementary schools, and the total amount is $5,457. And Tara, I don't know if you know what the next round of programs are, but I'm just here to request that the money be accepted.
They're in the middle of the program.
They are.
I do know that they had a puppet group that they were
Yeah.
pulling in, and there was.
Is-
I don't know what's the next one that's coming up.
But they've just finished a round,
Just had a,
right?
it's a lot Latin music, South American music. It was
Correct.
absolutely fantastic for students and staff to be up dancing, feeling the rhythm, hearing some stories together. It was really a.
You were out front on that one, Mike?
I was hiding in the back, taking pictures, supporting silently.
So
It's a great program. It is.
Maybe we'd ask for your approval of their.
I make a motion, we approve the donation.
Second.
Any questions or comments? None, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That's terrific. The last 4 items on these past 4 items, it's a testimony to the generosity of the people in our community and the work and the dedication of our parent-teacher organizations over the years. Those are amazing numbers. It's always a pleasure to be able to thank them for the gifts that they are able to make to the district. Moving on to information and reports, Matt and Aaron, I believe, are going to do the student achievement data report, strategic plan update.
Yep, Aaron's going to kick that off.
Okay. All right, tonight we have a presentation. Typically what we would do at the start of the year is give you the overview of the standardized test results of the CMT and the CAPT. And we're basically in what we're calling this data-free zone where we don't have those standardized assessment results to share with you. So, but we do have some results, some measures that we would like to. Of course, the CMT science in 5 and 8, grades 5 and 8, and the CAPT science in grade 11, and some other data points to give you a sense of how we're monitoring progress without the standardized assessments. One thing that's clear with the SBAC is that this is the operational year for SBAC, meaning these scores will count at the springtime. It will be another year beyond that before we will have any comparable data, because the SBAC, the Smarter Balanced Assessment data, will not be comparable to the legacy assessments of the CMT and the CAPT. So what we'll talk with you about tonight is a quick data review. Just to let you know that all of our principals, Neil Sullivan, Brian White, and our elementary principals will be presenting in October, November, and December in much more detail. So this is a very high-level overview of the data. And Matt will give an overview of our strategic planning process that we've engaged in over the past year and prepared this summer. And then I will give you a highlight of the achievement markers that we will be looking at through the strategic plan over the next 5 years. So at Simsbury High School, some of the markers that we're looking at obviously are CAP Science, AP participation, college acceptance, college completion, and so a new data point that we'll share with you, and Neil will go in much more detail, but 2012 PISA results that we have for students at Simsbury. We are very pleased to share with you our science CAPT results. We are at 82% of our students that have met or exceeded goal on the CAPT, with 62% of our students in the advanced band, which is a real great improvement. We had some pretty lengthy conversations with our science department chair and science teachers, and all collectively concerned about the results that we were seeing, and put an action plan together, and it really paid off, and we're really pleased with the results for our students. Our SAT scores continue to be steady and strong as we compare them to the state of Connecticut and nationally. We'll look at those in much more detail as we compare to the DIRG and to DIRG A and DIRG B when Neil does his presentation, but again, we're pleased with the results that we see. When we look at advanced placement, we're looking at the number or the percentage of students that complete at least one AP course, an advanced placement course, before graduation, and we see that we have 72% of our students. That is one marker of college and career readiness, to have been taking a college course during high school. The percent of AP students that take at least one AP exam is at 97%, which is remarkable in that sense. There are kids that sometimes will take an AP course but not sit for the exam, and we have 97% of our students that are doing that. And again, with the AP exam pass rate, more students taking the exam, but at 78%, it's a very steady pass rate that we see there with that AP getting a 3 or higher on the advanced placement exams. When we look at college acceptance, we want to account for all of our seniors as they exit Simsbury High School. And when we're looking at students that are leaving Simsbury and going on to a 2 or 4 year college. It's 92% of our students. Out of that 92%, 85% of those students are going to 4-year colleges. And 19% of those students were admitted to the most competitive colleges. We are seeing a higher percentage of students that are going to prep school or taking a gap year. That's becoming more common, but again, we're accounting for students. But what we do have, and Neil will share some results with you as well, of the students, the marker is 6 years out of high school. That's really the mark that they want to see, the percentage of students that graduate from college. And so we'll go into much more detail at that point. The last data point that we have, we had some select number of students that were chosen to participate in the PISA, randomly chosen in this in 2012. And what this is really demonstrating how students can show their knowledge, reflect on, and apply their knowledge in reading, science, and mathematics. And they take 34 countries, and in reading, as they make our comparison, our Simsbury students to those 34 countries, we do as well as those 34 countries in reading and in science. And in math, 2 countries do better than us. And this is exciting data. We'll continue. They do it triennially every 3 years, and so we'll take a look at it. But Neil will have other information to share with you on that. But it gives us another marker to demonstrate how our students perform internationally, not just within Connecticut and or in the United States. At the middle school, there's 2 data points that we're looking at when we're looking at middle school performance. We're extremely proud of our middle school science results on the CMT. Our 8th grade students scored 91% of our students were at or above goal on the CMT. You can see that there's just this continual increase. And again, remember, this is in 5th grade, 8th grade, and so it's a cumulative amount of knowledge that students gain over the course of years. And this is in 8th grade from 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and so that was a great performance for our students. The other marker that we're looking at at the middle school is DRP, which is the Degrees of Reading Power, which is a reading comprehension test. And again, we've got very solid performance on that at our middle level as well, in both grade 7 and 8.
Erin, I'm sorry, the grade 8 science CMT.
Yes.
We're looking at each 8th grade class, not the 8th
Not the
grade
cohort.
performance through time.
Correct. This is 8th grade over time, different sets of kids.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And this is just another way to look at it again, different sets of kids. And one of the goals that we've really put forward when we were looking at CMT and at CAPT is getting, a higher percentage of kids in that advanced band. And again, we're very solid there with 44. We'd like to get 50% or more there, but I think we're second in the state, Brian, in 8th grade science. And so that's, we're really pleased with those results.
So the grade 7 in 2013, the grade 8 in 2014, is that
No,
the
they
same?
don't. They only take it in 8th grade. They take it in 5th grade and 8th grade. So they're not tested in 7th grade on
No,
science.
But the DRP?
Oh, yes, yes, okay.
Okay,
Yes,
does it
yeah.
work that way?
Yes, it does, yeah. So when we look at our elementary school, we have a couple of different ways that we look at progress. You'll hear a little bit more about it in a few minutes, but we look at, again, the degrees of reading power. We do the DRP actually at the end of 2nd grade, and then grades 3 through 8, beginning and end of year for the degrees of reading power. And again, very solid results with that. The developmental reading assessment, too, you'll hear teachers talk, it's very DRE, too. But this is a universal screening tool that we use, and teachers systematically observe and record how students are reading in kindergarten, 2nd, and 3rd grade. And we all know that reading is the gateway to future learning. So we're always looking to ensure that our kids are reading by the end of 3rd grade. And so this is one of the tools that we will mark and will continue to mark over time. The grade 5 science, 86%, again, a solid performance for our students, with almost 50%, but 47% of our students falling in the advanced band. So that's a very high-level overview of district data, but again, I'll say it again, principals will have a little bit more detail, especially Neil at the high school level with all of these data points broken down into a little bit more discussion.
One of the things we're working on a little differently, I guess, with principals as they come forward is not only doing a little recap of their strategic plan or their continuous improvement process, but to lay the groundwork early a little bit for themes and maybe some potential needs that they have budgetarily. So we're trying to wrap these things, so we don't want to do a complete repeat for everybody tonight. But again, I'm going to give, Aaron, you can just flip to the first slide, that'd be great.
So Matt, just a quick question. So there's lots of good news in what Aaron just went over.
Right.
Are there any kind of themes that kind of hit either of you in terms of things to be working on that are like, you know, because there was lots of good news.
Yeah.
Things were going well,
Yeah.
and I know that.
I'm going to hit on some of those
Okay.
kind of areas here, but I think, you know, it's an interesting time, and Aaron talked about the fact that we're in this transitional period with assessments. So a lot of the work that's going on right now at the elementary level in particular, but at middle school level, are some new markers, some new assessments to put into place. You know, we've been in this transitional Common Core period from a curriculum alignment standpoint for the last 3 to 4 years. We have most of those pieces. I mean, it's not completely done. I'm not going to paint the picture that it is, but most of that heavy lifting done. So now I think, for lack of a better term, a good time to get our assessment house in order. And I think that's a place where we can clean some things up, really define some metrics that align with our strategic plan, and really do a more definitive job of how we measure what we say is important to work on.
I think that, Tom, one of the things we had shared with you, the school profiles and the district profiles, and brought forward the 5 subgroups of students. So when you have 80% or 91% or even 97%, it's not 100% of your students. So one of the things that we've been working with and talking with teachers about is how are we paying attention to all kids, ensuring that all kids are making growth over the course of the school year. So through our teacher evaluation plan, teachers are using data to dig deep and to find out who the kids are that they're working with to provide intervention or supports for students to get them closer, because the gap can get wider if we're not paying attention to that. So we have excellent results. We talk about that a lot. Our students do really well. They come very well prepared to school, but there are still areas that we have to pay attention to.
I think one other theme, and Helen will talk about it in more detail when she presents, but our transitional programming for special needs students when we come out of elementary school, where they spend 7 years, into the middle school, and then high school middle school into high school. So Janet Haley right now is really taking a look from an assessment standpoint at what services and programs we offer for kids, and have some suggestions for us as we move forward. But I know that's a piece that's extremely important to Helen. That's a piece we've gotten feedback on from parents in particular, that those are some tricky years as students transition from one level to the next. So that would be an area of programmatic improvement.
So I didn't mean to give you a whole other presentation.
While we're on this point, and I don't know if this is more when Neil's here, but I'm curious, now that we had the 11th grade pilot last year, they've postponed it for this year, I thought? No?
No.
They have not.
There was
They have not.
conversation regarding that they would, but they have said that the 11th graders will take the SBAC.
They will.
They will.
Do they have a time frame for that?
It's usually the last 6 to 8 weeks of school. There's so many days of school that have to be completed. I don't know it off the top of my head, but it's about April-ish, and then following that for high school students.
So
I think it's a
along
topic
with
that'll be
AP and along
revisited,
with
but
finals,
not for this
we're
year.
gonna, and SAT and all
on-
of that, we're gonna
right.
throw this in there.
Right.
Okay,
It's
I
on-
thought that they were gonna, I thought I heard the governor back off that.
You heard him talk about it, but
He did.
there was no, as far as we know, I was at a meeting last week, and they said it was on. The 11th grade is on.
Okay.
Other questions on the student achievement data portion of before we move on to the strategic plan update?
We have to fix
Anybody
that.
That's a
We
big
have to
challenge.
fix that.
It is a challenge.
That's too much.
Right.
I mean, even just the kids who piloted it last year, they were just melting, you know, and we all know I have one of them, and it was too much. You were there.
Yeah.
It was too much.
By even 3 days in, everyone was just zombified. I think that probably is the best way to describe it.
Yeah.
Which is exactly the kind of mental state you want people taking
going into
AP
finals.
tests and finals.
And finals and SATs and all of it.
And all these other wonderful tests that we keep talking
If anything changes, we'll let you know, but as far as we know, at this point in the year, it's on.
Okay. All right.
Other questions on the data portion before we move on to goals? The couple of comments on that slide 7, I think it was, on the high school, the percentage of students with 1 AP.
Yes.
It went from 56 to 72. That's an enormous increase. That's like a 30% increase
And
from 11 to
Right.
now.
what we're
So is that-
attempting to do is to open up and make more available accessible AP courses for students.
Is that's a big jump? Is that what you would attribute it to?
I would
just
say that's a good reason. Neil can certainly answer that in more detail, but that's one of the things we've talked about over time at the curriculum committee is to try to find more accessible AP courses to engage kids in.
Haven't we put one in
Yes,
the
we
last
have.
2 years?
Yeah, AP, yeah.
Well, it's the more general population courses that are more.
But the
increased.
opportunity to
Interesting.
participate in that kind of coursework at the high school level is really powerful for kids as they move on.
Will this report be up on the website?
Yes, we can.
And that, can we highlight that PISA data specifically? Because I think that's important data. You hear so much about how we're not competitive with students in other countries. but
That's
that
right.
That tends to be aggregate numbers for a
I don't want to steal
big
Neil's
population.
thunder, but he'll talk more about that.
He's going to wish he came.
More people are taking them, but the achievement, the results are
Well, it's
stable.
demonstrated that as we've
Right.
opened up,
They're
it's a
still
belief
doing-
set, right?
Yeah.
You provide opportunities for students and they'll rise up and meet the challenge. So I think that's what that data demonstrates, which is
Yeah.
pretty important.
Good. Okay, any other questions? Move on.
All right, move on. So again, quick overview on this, and just to reiterate what Aaron said, we have areas that we do extremely well. We still have areas that we feel we need to focus on and move forward in our strategic planning process is really the framework for that. So this is just to acknowledge that the work that we engaged in last year as a board, that we engaged our administrative council in and sought parent input on, is in motion this year, and that started with a revision of our kind of framing documents, our vision, our core beliefs, our standard set of belief sets that really serve to help us with our messaging, help us with our planning from a strategic standpoint. So we start with that document, which I know that is familiar to you, and I think we've really done a nice job of kind of collectively identifying the important things to our district. We framed out 5, and these are broad area goals. You've seen them before, but this serves to really kick off the planning process that occurs at the building level. So encompassing goal around student achievement that covers both learning experiences academically, but also extracurricular activities. We have a goal around professionalism. That goal really gets at our effective teachers and effective leading and our evaluation work. And we know that research says that the number one largest impact on student learning is an effective classroom teacher. Second to that, leadership matters. Building leadership matters. So we framed work that will go on at the building level around that goal. School culture, of course, remains extremely important. Sue updates us several times a year on character ed improvement work going on at the building level, as well as anything that has to do with our safety plans. Communication, I know we just had a subcommittee meeting today, but we've really thought a lot about communication over the course of the past several years. We have, I think, done some proactive things on our push communication, communicating more with parents, but I think we need to think about how we pull feedback from parents. So I know that we have some initial thoughts there from the communications subcommittee, and we'll be working on that this year. This is the first year we have in our strategic plan a resources goal, so a goal that is specific to budgeting. And what we're going to do this year is really align our budget requests with our vision, with our core beliefs, and with specific Board of Ed goals. We think that'll help us articulate our process more succinctly in a way that demonstrates more impact. So from the way this works, our 5 broad goals, we've developed what we call district focus indicators. And Tom, this gets a little bit at what your question was, although not in a great deal of detail. But you can see the broad area goals. For achievement, we have focus indicators at each level. I'll just talk about a couple of them because the principals are going to come forward and talk at a greater level of detail. But that first one, all students reading on grade level by 3rd grade. We know that's an extremely important marker in early literacy development for students. One of the things we did, and I hope I brought the resource with me, Katie's only given it to me 80 times.
It's on my desk.
Probably on Aaron's desk.
It's in the file on the right.
But we got with teachers last year and really looked at our achievement data in 3rd grade. and sought their input on different high-leverage strategies and things we were doing from either a curriculum standpoint, an instructional standpoint. What could we think about that would really help improve performance in early literacy? And Betsy Gonzalez with our teacher leadership team really developed a great resource, which I wanted to show off. I'm sure Katie will come running in with it. But
She probably can't find it. Did she find it? Oh, good.
all right, she'll pass that around. But it's a teacher resource that really gets at our balanced literacy program. What are the important areas that we want to focus on? I think it's laid out in teacher language. It's very friendly. We're also working on a parent resource to really help our parents understand when we talk about reading workshop, when we talk about balanced literacy, what are the key components and what language do you need to be familiar with as a parent to help support your child. So, we sought teacher feedback. We listened to that. A lot of our teachers, you can take a peek at this, in the primary grades will have their individual goals aligned to the third grade literacy goal. So I think we have a nice sense of coherence from that standpoint. You can see the next couple bullets really hit at transitional points for our students, that students will hit important grade level markers in the content areas by 6th grade, by 8th grade, and be college and career ready while they, as they move towards high school. So I know Brian, he's in the audience, but when he comes and talks to you, he's going to talk about some of the great writing work that they're doing across content areas and how he's utilizing his instructional coaches to really ramp that effort up. And Neil's going to talk about his close reading initiative, really looking explicitly at complex text and how we can dive deeper into that across content areas. So really taking some of these improvement initiatives, not doing them in literacy isolation, but really exploring them across content, I think is new and exciting work for us. The professionalism indicator is one that I know we're excited about. This year we're kind of engaging our teachers in kind of a new professional challenge, and that's to get out and see each other teach a little bit more. And you would think we'd have opportunities to do that a lot. We don't, by the nature of what we do and how we operate, but we've gotten feedback from our staff over the course of the past couple years that while we value so much of our professional learning community initiative time, how can we get time that if I have a problem of practice or I have a teacher challenge, I want to go see a colleague that's really good at this in play and see that live. So at each of the schools, they're engaging in this in different ways, but we're going to have opportunities for all our staff members at various points of the year in different structures, go see teachers teach, and then have an opportunity to come back and talk about what we learned either in a whole faculty or in a teacher team. And I think what this is, from my lens, is an effort to scale up that collaborative practice beyond just the teacher team, which is where it's sat for quite a few years now, and really talk and share our practices school-wide. And I know that we're excited about that. We need to do some creative scheduling and find ways to make that happen. That's why it's not going to look exactly the same at every school. But that's something that really kind of encompasses our professional development for teachers this year. I talked a little bit about the communication goal already and the importance for that pull communication. We're also taking a look at our district-wide website and hopefully freeing up some funds this year, if not next year, to really look at a revamp of that website. We've met with our website designers, and I think we can just do some different things a little more creatively, a little more succinctly, to not only provide some parent resources, but just clean up the way that we present some of our information. So I know we're looking forward to that as well. In the resources, I touched on that. We talked at our last board meeting about our collective efforts with the Board of Finance to look at some 5-year long-range planning. We've provided them with some data. We haven't met yet, but I know that those efforts as we move into budget season will be important. And I think what will be important for us is to ensure the percentage of funding that goes towards instruction in the district. We are forced to respond to non-instructional areas quite often, growing costs in the area of pension liabilities and benefits. Well, how can we ensure that we protect the instructional resources and continue to improve in those areas? So I think tying things in the budget process to our goals will help us to articulate that, help the board to ask questions in those areas and keep us honest on that. Because the last thing we want to do is impact instruction negatively to support the budget in other areas. So I think we need to be real strategic about that moving forward. Much more to come on this with presentations from each of the principals, but wanted to give you a bit of an overview of how the work is going. And these last two visuals just highlight a process that I think those in the district have been familiar with for quite some time, and it's how we live and it's how we work in the continuous improvement model that we start at the district level with our continuous improvement planning. Each building principal has a plan that then they tie to our teacher plans, their professional growth plans, and their evaluation. And I think the fact now that we've had an opportunity to come in as a leadership team and kind of create a synthesis between the two systems that we had to work with the MC and the broader goals and kind of bring that together will allow us to be much more coherent and targeted as we plan thoughtfully moving forward into the future here. So I'm going to move it back to Erin. She's going to talk about a few of the assessments.
Just very quickly, we've spent a lot of time over this past year when we were working on the 5-year Board of Ed goals, and most specifically the achievement goal. What is it that we're looking for, and how will we then mark progress of students when we're in this zone of no standardized assessments or assessments that we can't compare to previous ones. So I want to just focus on the achievement, and Matt actually talked about this, but at our elementary schools, looking at reading at the end of grade 3, but you would see in each of our principals' plans, there are markers for kindergarten, where kids should be at the end of kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and then third grade, and we'll be using 2 different assessments to try to figure out and make sure kids are getting to those markers. And then again, at that transition time, as students are leaving 6th grade, so it's 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, there's markers in each of those grades in reading, writing, and mathematics. So as they transition to the middle school, when we're looking at achievement at the middle school, we're looking at students being ready and prepared to leave Henry James and move on to Simsbury High School with grade level or above skills in reading, writing, and math. And finally, the college and career readiness. When we talk about assessments, there's so many different terms that are used when we talk about them. When we look at student assessment, we look at universal assessments, formative assessments, summative assessments, standardized assessments. They all seem to play out in various grade levels over the course of the year, some more important, some less important, but they all build this body of knowledge around how kids are performing and growing from when they enter a grade level to the point when they exit the grade level. What I do want to point out here, these are the achievement markers that we have collectively agreed upon, and you can see down the first column the various types of assessments. Some of them I've spoken to you about tonight. The DRA2, you can see, is in kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. DRP, CMT Science in both 5th and 8th. STAR Math is a new assessment that we're using this year. In the past, we had the CMT Math, but we haven't had real good formative or summative assessment around how students are doing in grades 2 through 6 in mathematics. And we piloted this assessment last year in the springtime. We think it's going to give us some good information, and it's nationally normed. So it's not a test that we're just using internally.
How often do you take that test?
It'll be 3 times a year. In the fall, you take a baseline, the middle of the year, and it's one of those assessments that is adaptive, so a student can work.
It's one day, or is it?
It's probably a 20 to 30 minute assessment.
Oh.
It's not a stop. It's when kids are ready to take it, they'll be taking it. Ready Step is also, when Brian spoke about the PSAT assessment for the 10th and the 11th grade, tomorrow morning the 8th graders will be engaged in Ready Step. Ready Step is the test prior to the PSAT. It's a College Board assessment that students will take in reading, math, and writing. And it's a paper pencil assessment that they'll be engaged in tomorrow morning, but it will give us some good information around how students are doing, but it will also link them into our Naviance and the College Board, My College work that they can do at an earlier age and begin to use that in their student success plans that we begin in 6th grade. We can continue to utilize this information, again, nationally normed, will give us information on their college and career readiness. So you'll see the tie from 8th grade to 10th grade to 11th grade, and then on to the SAT that can be taken in 11th and 12th grade.
Is Ready Step the same company as PSAT and
Yes, it
SAT?
is. Yes, it is.
And how long have you been taking it?
Tomorrow's the first time.
And how do the kids feel? Are they stressed about it? Are they nervous?
I haven't heard the students are aware they're taking it tomorrow, so it'll be interesting to see how it goes.
We'll know
The
after
sessions
tomorrow.
break down into roughly 40 minutes per
It's not a long.
It's kind of hard to be talking college in 8th grade. I'm just thinking. It's a
But
little-
it's
it's a little
similarly
stressful
set
as
up
it is.
testing-wise to like the PSAT, or are we?
It's a 40-minute assessment that they'll take, and it's not, so it's not as involved.
just
It's
40
not. It's for like a class period that they'll be taking. So 3 40-minute sessions?
40 minutes.
Okay, yeah. And,
So taking in your math or your English, whatever the appropriate class is, or
They'll be taking them home tomorrow.
yeah.
homeroom?
Yeah. Yep.
So we have a modified schedule for our 8th graders.
Okay.
And then again, it's around high school readiness, so that'll be the measure.
So one of the things, when you mentioned, thinking about college and those kinds of things, when the SBAC becomes operational and we get results back, parents will be informed about their child's college and career readiness, all the way from 3rd grade through 8th grade, and so it's this marker that our kids in line to be prepared for each grade level, and so you'll get this measure of college and career readiness. So
What happens when
it's
they
never
say
too
they're not
early.
ready to go to college in 3rd grade? They're not ready.
So that terminology is there, exactly.
That's all I
And that's
want.
what we
That's all
want.
I want to hear.
And, it's the terms that we throw out, and I think it's really, are we gathering information that's going to help us provide the best instructional strategies and supports and enhancements to kids? I'm not just looking for kids that need supports, but what about kids that need something beyond? And these, we believe, are true markers that will help us, that aren't just Simsbury markers, but national markers that will help us see how our kids are performing.
But Tara, to your point, we were talking about this in our meeting today. We're still unsure of what some of these reporting mechanisms will come back looking like from SBAC. So while we're learning, we're trying to figure out and gauge how can we best communicate with parents so that when they look at something that looks very different from what they saw before, how do they interpret it? How do we, kind of monitor those things appropriately for people? So, but there's a lot of unknown, and that's been one of the challenges working with SBAC, and we've said that all along, is we kind of have to see how it goes that first time. We participated last year. We better understand how we can deal with it from a technological standpoint, but we've received no achievement data back. And we're going to receive very little achievement data back. And when we get it, I think it's going to be in January, we're being told.
And what percentage of, what percentage of school districts participated last year?
Oh, there was quite a few, like, I want to
There
say, I was going to say
Very high
85 or
percentage.
90% of
So there is data out there, if they know how to put it together.
Eventually, right?
Will be.
You
Is
would
it, is just the way these things fall out, or is there a particular reason why there's nothing falling in 9th grade?
Freshman, yeah.
Well, that's interesting, and we've talked about that because there are ways in which, but that's such a transitional year for kids, and we want them to, enter. We have a lot of internal assessments that we have at the end of, whether they're beginning of the year, mid-year, and end of the year, internal assessments that we've created, but we don't have any other bigger markers in 9th grade. It's something that we are also talking about as well. But at this point, that transition to 9th grade we think is an important one, and we want kids to feel comfortable. Kids that gain the correct number of credits in 9th grade is a very high predictor of high school graduation. So we want to ensure that they are getting the supports internally and with classroom teachers in 9th grade.
Sorry, I'll stop
One more thing on the ready stuff. If it's a high school readiness, why are we taking it at the beginning of 8th grade instead of in the spring?
It's made for 8th grade. You can they could take it in 8th grade.
They barely started 8th grade. I guess that's my question. It's early 8th grade.
Yeah, it's when the college, they say that we can take it. It's
Okay.
geared toward their age level, the grade equivalency, and their age level, and so that's why we're taking it. We could take Ready Step again in 9th grade, but we're choosing not to do that at this point. We think in 8th grade, it will also give us good indication for kids in regard to their course choices at the high school when we begin to look at how kids are performing with a body of evidence, with all the other kinds of assessments that we're looking at as well. So it's one piece of evidence that we'll look at. So here's the presentations will be October 28th with Neil. Brian will be November 12th, and the elementary principal presentation will be on December 9th.
Questions or comments?
Yeah, I just,
That's okay.
my comment is, I know there's a lot of more behind these
Yes.
PowerPoints. We
Yeah.
participated in kind of the vision and goal setting last year, and I know there's a lot of detail behind each of these indicators. And I think it's great that you were able to kind of convey in one page the goals, the the key items for achievement, and these. I know that was. Confrontational, but I know a lot of people had different opinions about kind of what should be included on each
Right.
of these indicators, and I just think it's important to kind of lay it out there as, hey, all the kids are going to be at reading, all kids are going to be at the bar as high as possible. Exactly, so.
It's nice to see them concise and available.
It does sort of illustrate the degree to which we're doing, and everybody, I guess, is doing assessments. If you add up the X's here, there are 30 of them, and some grades 4 times. They're assessed 4 times in grade 5, for example. And that's not counting quizzes and
The regular
internal
schoolwork, the
assessments.
regular
So,
curriculum.
I know that's the way we have to go, but it does make you
That's
think about it.
even one of the, when you talk to teachers, that's one of the struggles and one of the
Yeah.
things we need to balance is how much information do they need really to drive their instruction, which is most important, and some of the other markers that gauge your kind of district dashboard and achievement levels. How do you balance that out so you have time for the teach, right? And it's
Yeah.
not just
And the analyzing the data.
Right.
I mean, because the analyzing the data takes a lot of
Correct.
time too. To
Right.
give the
Right.
test, to analyze the test, and to figure out programming for the children, students. So it's so awesome when you read it this way.
Okay,
Yep.
Thank you very much.
thanks, Aaron and Matt. Sue, you're up with the October 1 enrollment report.
Terrific. So at our first board meeting this year, I shared with you some data relative to our opening day numbers, but made a promise that I would be back post-October 1 to share with you in greater detail numbers regarding our projected and actual enrollment as compared to our October 1 day, and we always use that. That is a time where we are reporting some enrollment data to the state, but it also gives things time to kind of settle out in the first couple of weeks of school. So as promised, we're going to be taking a look at our October 1 enrollment data, some projections versus our actual numbers, sliced in many different ways. From there, we're also going to talk about class size at the elementary level, and I have Brian White and Eileen Eustace, who will also be sharing with you some data relative to class size at the middle and high school levels. So with that, again, feel free at any point to interject and ask questions, and we'll also provide some time at the end of that as well. In your exhibits, you have a lot of detail, but again, just wanted to highlight some of the most significant figures and data regarding our enrollment. So this first table really shows a K-6 middle school and high school breakdown of our actual enrollment at this point last year, October 1, as compared to this year, and the differences. Certainly, this is what we expected, that number of a decline of 76 overall in the district. We'll talk a little bit about this number in grades 7 and 8 later. That is something that we didn't expect. We expected some flat enrollment, and you'll see that was specific to some increase that we had specific to the 8th grade this year. This second table, we actually broke down the data projected versus actual. So in this first strand here, you'll see what it looks like K-6 overall. So very close to our projections, just one under. You'll also see it broken down by school. And again, this is where we can look at the middle school level of being up 12, and Simsbury High overall in grades 9 through 12 down 10. So overall projected versus actual, we're actually one up from our projected. This is a trend that we were excited to see. Our actual versus enrollment number, or projected versus actual, have been a little off. the past couple of years, so we were excited to see this closer approximation to that projected versus actual. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit more later in the presentation.
And maybe this comes up later, but can you tell if, you know, the plus 15s and the minus 18s do you look to see if, are they people moving within the district, you know, within Simsbury to like different elementary schools, or are they people moving in and out?
It's certainly a combination, and it depends upon the school. You know, one thing around the Simsbury High School, and we look at the projections being 10 off, I actually did a deeper level, and there was a lot of students who actually moved out of Simsbury, like away, out of state, and that we had in our projection numbers. So there's different stories at each building level, and what that looks like between intra-district moves and then out-of-district moves. There's also going to be some really interesting in-migration data that we'll get to in a second. So another comparison of our projected versus actual, and this I actually did by grade level from K to 12. So we see some interesting numbers here that I want to point out. One is at the first grade level, off 23. And I think part of that is because when we send our numbers to NESDEC, they really never attributed for the full day kindergarten, right? And that in migration to first grade. So we've had some detailed conversations with NESDEC this year, some particular things we are seeing. So again, I think even with that drop in projection versus actual, we were actually one more than the projected. And that would have been even higher, I think, had this been accounted for. Again, we see some uptick in grade 8, which we weren't expecting at all, but this again just gives a nice by grade projected versus actual. This next compares elementary enrollment by school, so you'll see, you know, Central, Latimer, Squadron, Terrifil, and Tooten, and then the actual differential. You know, and looking at these numbers, some of these certainly we expected. Terrifil, interesting, up 20 from last year. They were supposed to be up 10. They were projected at a 284. They ended up with a 294. Here at Tooten, we had a larger 6th grade class kind of moving out, so something certainly that we anticipated. Getting to your question, Todd, a little bit, these are numbers that compare those students who registered over the summer as compared to those who withdrew. So when you look at this, you'll certainly see an uptick of 72 as far as what we call in-migration over the summer. That is not something we've seen in the recent years. Last year, we actually saw a decline, and -6 actually. The year before, only a +2. We haven't seen numbers like this to the likes in the 70s since 2009, which was a 78 student in migration. So certainly, again, something that we spoke with NESDEC about, and we're going to be keeping our eye on. This just gives you an overall 5-year historical enrollment trend. So overall, you know, we've declined in the past 5 years, a reduction of 477 students, which represents a 10% decrease, again in line with what we have projected, but something that we're responding to, and you'll actually hear more about later in when we give a facilities and enrollment update. Some grade cohort sizes. Our largest cohorts are in grades 12 and 8 respectively. Our smallest in first grade and in kindergarten. So again, something that we're watching closely when we see these smaller cohorts over time. Our open choice, pre-K through 12. Again, this is our 3rd year for open choice, having preschool students with us. We have 10 this year, again for a total of 146. Last year we were at 140. With those numbers. You definitely have a more detailed picture of our part-time and full-time magnet and out-of-district program and enrollment, but a couple of things that I wanted to highlight for you this evening. We have 146 students in full-time programs outside of Simsbury, so that represents an increase of 10 students. Something that we pay particular attention to, though, are those pre-K and K enrollments. So this year, 80 of those 146, or 55%, are enrolled in those pre-K and K magnets, That's actually down from last year of about 8%. Last year was at 63%. So again, those are numbers that we're watching. Of all of the magnets, we have 6 new magnets that students are attending for a total of 10 students. But we do see some decreases. One in particular is one of our pre-K programs out of district, and hopefully that is a factor of the preschool offerings that we offer here, but also our full day kindergarten also has an impact on that as well.
So I just want to jump in and remind folks, one thing at play here is that correct preschools are tuition free
That's correct.
for parents. So as opposed to a preschool program that we run through continuing education, which a Simsbury resident would have to pay tuition for. So it's just an interesting dynamic out there that we need to compete with.
Absolutely. Also represented in the state, 18 students are at part-time magnet or out-of-district programs. So that's a very small increase of 2 students from last year. Those students are reflected in our October 1 counts because they do spend part-time here in district. So very quick overview of our October 1 enrollment data, but would certainly entertain any questions or comments before we transition into class size.
Questions?
How many students in these numbers are we either getting reimbursements of Project Choice or tuition paying? Kids who live in Bloomfield, for example, may come in. How many kids are we getting money coming in the door?
We've got 146
We have
choice
146
students.
choice students.
Burke, would you know tuition payment? It's a pretty low number.
Down a little bit. I think we have one that I can think of.
Is that down? Is that
It's down in our estimates. We had downgraded that for revenues from out of district tuition. We used to have a few students from Heartland, and we have not had any of those.
I can certainly get you that level of detail.
just curious at the levels?
Other questions? No? Okay.
Okay, so with that, we'll transition to our class size reports, and I would ask Brian and Eileen to come up and join me at this time, and I'll start off with the elementary class size. So again, certainly you have a greater level of detail in your exhibits, but a couple of things that I want to point out. If you look at our grades K2 and then 3-6, you'll notice that our average class size is right within the range of our Board of Ed guidelines. And again, we have a differentiated range class size guideline for K through 2 than we do through 3 through 6. So K through 2, it's that 18 to 22, and our 3 through 6 is that 21 to 25. You'll also note that in the classroom FTE, there were some efficiencies that we made over the course of this year looking at our class size, and that was in the tune of 5 classroom FTE at the elementary level. And so when you look at the number of classes that exceed the range, but even more specifically the number of classes below the range, you'll see certainly some efficiencies there, where last year the percent of classes below the range were at 42, and now we're at 31. So I think that certainly speaks to some efficiencies that we actualized through the reduction of classroom FTE.
And I would just, say if we could go back and revisit kind of the themes of the budget last year, I talked quite a bit about the fact that we first look at our decline in enrollment, and we need to take what we were calling responsible reductions of FTE, but wanted to plan thoughtfully within class size guidelines.
That's right.
It worked out pretty well here. It didn't work out as well here. Not to steal their thunder, but we've gotten some influxes, and as you saw, with the enrollment report, some unexpected influxes of enrollment in different places. And I think, when we get ready and we start to plan for the budget process, that's important information for us to share. We plan thoughtfully with the projected numbers we had. It's not an exact science. And when you skin it as close as you can, I think you can create some challenges along the way that we need to be willing to talk about. So, not to steal thunder, but I'm sure both of you will mention that.
They might.
Okay.
They might. So first we'll start off with Henry James, and I'll ask Brian to share his thoughts and comments.
Sure. Well, good evening, everybody. And I'll just sort of walk you through some of the highlights of the slide you have in front of you, and then certainly any questions you have we can talk about. So just a quick overview. So going into the 14-15 school year, the number of classes that we have at Henry James is 343, and this is a decrease of 15 from the previous school year. In the core academic classes or core classes, and in those we include math, science, social studies, ELA, and world language, we've seen a decrease in 14 classes overall. One of the things this year we did was we eliminated a .6 team. Last year we had a .6 team or a partial team, and as part of our decrease in FTE last year, that .6 team was consolidated into our current structure of 3 teams in grade 7 and 3 teams in grade 8. And as the superintendent pointed out, when we get into the 8th grade, we'll talk a little bit about where that puts some pressure on class size, coupled with the unexpected uptick in enrollment over the summer. In our Unified Arts classes, basically we saw that number of classes remaining the same. In PE, we saw a reduction of 1 class. The number of our classes below range decreased by 41, from 71 down to 30. So that could be seen as an example of efficiency. The number of classes exceeding range increased by 27 classes, from 32 to 59. And we saw an increase in the number of classes over guidelines in the academic areas from 5 to 35 this school year. So those are some of the basic highlights when you look at those numbers.
And Brian, when you take a deeper dive, the majority of those classes were in the 8th grade.
That's correct. That's correct. And as you saw with some of those initial slides, a net gain of about 12, most of those occurring in 8th grade, which is really where you see that reflected in the numbers.
Brian, when you go over, how far do you go over? If you go over by 1, that counts just as much as if you go over by 5. So what's the average number?
That's correct. And you're typically, when we talk about classes over, you're typically at 1 or 2. You're not talking about 5 or 6.
Right.
And that's an important distinction. Thank you.
Do we have any insight as to the in-migration? What's the spike in 8th grade?
The grade 8.
No patterns as of yet. Something that we certainly will take a look at. There is some out-of-district moves. There are some returning from private schools that we didn't anticipate. And then sometimes you get some out-migration that just wasn't actualized either. But it was definitely specific to 8th grade. 7th grade was projected at 355. They came right in at 355, right on the money. And we
Both
just saw
those grade levels, to Brian's point, are staffed the same.
That's correct.
And that's not what we saw in the previous years for 8th grade.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
So in the data, I know, you were asking, hey, you're 1 over, 2 over. There are a couple with the maximum shown that are a couple 3 over.
Sure, there are a few, absolutely.
And they're in math. It's pre-algebra, math 8.
Sure. So when we construct the schedule, one of the things we look at is balancing, and every year part of my presentation has been to talk a little bit about teaming at the middle school and the teaming concept. And one of the parameters that we sort of introduce to the process when we talk about teams is looking at how students are grouped and how they move through the schedule during the day as a group. And so with the teaming model, we believe there's lots of benefits, but from a scheduling perspective, it's a little less efficient and there are some compromises. So at times, if kids are grouped in teams, some of those situations where you get into more than 2 over are unavoidable. But we do our very best and we spend a lot of time to balance the schedule.
How are the teachers handling the more crowded classrooms?
So they're handling it well. I think for us at Henry James, it's certainly larger than we've seen in recent years, and so it is noticeable. I think the teachers are responding very well to it. I don't anticipate it's going to impact the quality of education, but the classrooms are full, quite honestly, particularly in 8th grade.
You have 28 kids in a math class, that's tough.
Anything else, Brian?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Do you have enough materials for everybody? I mean, do you have to
Yes.
go out and get more?
No, we're, so far, so, thank you, so far, so good.
No, well, that's a great question. And at first blush, you would certainly think that, but we've had upward. You're talking about a middle school that has had over 800 students, so we've had materials because there's been more sections of 8th grade or more teams, 4 teams as opposed to 3 teams as we are current. But it's a great question. So this slide just certainly shows the complexity of the high school schedule, and there's a corresponding board as well at the middle school, but I'll turn it over to Eileen at this point to provide some comments about the high school.
That's actually last year's, but it looks
It
pretty
is.
similar. So you're welcome to come to my office anytime. Just don't take any of the magnets off the board. That's always the general rule. So I don't
Now we know how to get you.
Right. I had someone that came in this summer because we were looking at doing some scheduling, and she was taking the magnets off the board. I was like, "What are you doing? Like, you can't do that." So.
She's looking to put plexiglass over
That's
it.
right. And a padlock. That's right. So the report itself, if you take a close look at the numbers, pretty self-explanatory. I think if you actually look at this summary chart, we are offering 572 different class sections throughout the day. We're down from 613. If you actually, the number that concerns me the most is obviously the number of classes that are exceeding. We went from 33 to 66 this year. It was very significant. Clearly, it's the highest number of classes that are over. And Todd, you asked a good question. And even when you were down in the 30s and the 20s, it was usually maybe 1 over. We're seeing more and more classes at 27, 28, and even some tip the scale at 29. And we actually just went through a level change window, so the numbers are continually in flux, really, until we get to the end of the first quarter. So I know that number 66 is actually higher now. It's in the 70s now. It's probably about 10 more than that at this point. So, and that was because we just finished a level change window where we made some changes for students. The other thing too is that if you look at the number of classes below, we had a significant decrease. So while we're getting really much more efficient in many of those areas, we weren't able to be quite as efficient in the classes that are over. The dilemma always comes, even if you were to say, oh, we can give you a 0.2 back in math, it becomes the work of the department supervisor and the administration to decide, well, where does that go? But it only helps one course. It only helps, say, maybe Algebra 2 Level 1, and it doesn't then help your Algebra 1 Level 2 classes. When you're looking at where to put some of those, the FTE. So I will say we definitely had some significant cuts in FTE last year in the core areas, and we're clearly feeling it because the majority of the classes that are over do come from the core areas. So
We cut,
What do you mean by
did we cut? Hold on.
It was a 0.2 in areas, so your cuts.
well, some areas where social studies was a 1.4 cut. So if you actually look at the number of classes that are over in the social studies area, it's a tough area to, I mean, there's a lot of classes that are over now. Math, I don't know if there was an actual cut there, but don't forget that we also now, this is the first year that we had the 4-year requirement, so we actually took on an increase of about, typically, I would say somewhere between 88 and 90% of our students would take 4 years of math, but you were taking on an additional 10% of students taking math. So even to stay flat staffing is difficult in an area where you're taking on 10% more students, and you can actually see that in many of the math numbers as well.
I think one of the challenges too is when we're making decisions around staffing in the spring, we're doing that based upon what kids initially sign up for, right? And there are some changes in that as well, which also impact class size over time. So certainly we do our best to make the most informed staffing decisions about, where are kids deciding to show their interest. And there's that variability as well. That, again, is reflected when the numbers shake out in the fall.
Something else I'd like to point out, because I know the number below class size is always of intrigue to a lot of people. 26 of the 168 are singleton courses, which means if you don't offer the course, you're now compromising a program, because a lot of times some of those smaller classes are the ones, they're like the capstone classes. And because we focus so heavily on those career clusters and having students work their way through 2 to 3 years in a particular strand, you really want them to have that capstone experience. So even if that class is in the teens, you still want to be able to offer that, because that's really the culminating experience for a lot of students. The other thing I want to point out is that 36 of the 168 sections that are below class size come from courses that the overall average falls within the course guideline. So while there might be a section or two of, say, 10th grade English that may be below class size, the overall average is within range. And that's basically how we do our staffing. And sometimes the numbers play out on that, because it just depends on the overall scheduling board and sort of sometimes what classes are sort of pushing up against other classes. So some periods are a little more difficult to fill than others. So that tends to happen quite a bit. So if you take the 26 and the 36, you're really left with 102 classes that fall below. And then you kind of wrestle with the notion of, do you run a class of 34? Or do you run 2 sections of 17? You know, really what's in the best interest of kids at that point. And somebody had asked about the increase in the AP numbers. That I think, Mike, you were looking at that. Some of that actually coincides with the 8-period day. When we went to the 8-period day, there was more opportunity for students to take an additional course. Also, the civics requirement can now be met through the AP government class, and so that really has ballooned anywhere from, we used to only run maybe 2 sections of that, and it's run, now this year we're running 6 sections, last year we ran 8 sections, so much more wide open opportunity. And we're also offering classes such as AP Art, AP Environmental Science, and AP Computer Science, which is all, those things have all been added in recent years, and they're really seeing very healthy enrollment, which is really exciting for us. I feel like we used to send a lot of kids to the Math Science Academy, and if you actually look at the numbers now, we don't have anybody that goes there, because we have such strong offerings in math and science, and that's really, really exciting for our students.
That is great. Thank you. Questions for either Brian or Eileen?
I actually had a quick question about something I saw in here. A number that really jumped out to me, and something that I've kind of been hearing about, is as a senior, if you look at the grade 12 English.
Yes. Which one do you want to look at?
Level 2.
Yes.
The 13.
We've actually had a lot of concerns about the number of students that have dropped out of the AP literature class. That number is lower than what was initially requested, and therefore the level 2 classes have all ballooned up. Usually what we try to do in the summertime is make some schedule changes. Unfortunately, this year with the way it was all staffed, we weren't able to, say, pull an AP section and change it to a level 2 section this year. But it is something that we're looking at. As a matter of fact, Mr. Sullivan has literally interviewed every student that has dropped out of the AP literature, just to kind of find out, like, what's going on, what's the trend here, so we can try to figure this out with students.
Thanks, Brian.
Excellent question.
Anything else?
Other questions? Well, thank you, Eileen and Brian and Sue.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
And moving on, Facilities and Enrollment Task Force update. I think, Sue, you're going to give that to us, give the update.
Absolutely. So last May, I had the opportunity to come before the board and just to give you some progress on where we were relative to our response to declining enrollment. And just to remind the board, we have a multi-building, multi-year modular removal plan. So I gave you the update on that. We had some modular space removed at Tooten a couple of summers ago, and most recently at Latimer. which you did see it because
got the
Burke had that
before.
great
You did.
picture, the
Pictures on
before and after with the opening day report.
Bring it back.
We could.
Like the lawn.
Beautiful
At that point, I also shared with you some projections as far as our enrollment data and a recommendation from our Facilities and Enrollment Task Force at that point to look at the numerical feasibility of at the out year of 2018 and 19 and a reconfiguration containing only 4 elementary schools in that out year. And is that feasible or not? So between May and last week, we had the opportunity to actually conduct that numerical feasibility exercise and brought our Facilities and Enrollment Task Force back together last week on the 6th to share that data. So wanted to communicate with the board some of those outcomes of that meeting, also to invite any board members who are at that meeting to share anything additional, and then to answer any questions. But that numerical feasibility was an extensive review of the data, certainly associated with our declining enrollment, our projections, again, looking at that year of 18 and 19, that's when we see our enrollment flatten at the elementary level, and that's where we have the most confidence in our projections. Just as a reminder, if we go past those 5 years, that's when we have less confidence in those projections. But we looked at those enrollment figures, but also our facilities as relative to those enrollment projections. We developed a methodology that we reviewed collectively with the Facilities and Enrollment Task Force that really looked at a median class size and how much room do we have to assume other kids if we were going to go from 5 to 4 elementary schools. So we reviewed that data in detail, and because of that feasibility exercise, the Facilities and Enrollment Task Force made a recommendation that at this point they do not recommend any changes in the configuration that we have, the 5 elementary schools, the 1 middle school, and the 1 high school. But certainly, we would need to come back over the course of this year to review data. We need to take a look at our next phase of our modular removal project, and which is slated for Central's modulars this upcoming summer, to look at those numbers and to, again, see if that makes sense, but to also, at least on an annual basis, to apply this methodology of median class size versus our enrollment to make sure that that's where we still sit as far as a recommendation to not change the configuration at this time. So those were the overall outcomes. I don't know if board members have anything additional to share.
You know, Susan and Tara, you can add your comments. I think this is a sort of the executive summary of something like 2 years of work on the part of the Facilities and Enrollment Task Force. And the task force is made up of school district leadership, 3 board members, a number of teachers and other faculty members, and representatives of the community, the parent community at large. And a lot of work was done. I think we got the low-hanging fruit, as people like to say, with the modular removal. That's increased efficiency and brought our costs down. I think that where we're at now, the next decisions, should we have to make them at some point, are going to be the big ones, you know, about a school building at some point. At this stage, the math doesn't work. Aside from enrollment, depending on the building you're talking about, we have buildings that we've had substantial investments made in them recently. And again, depending on the building, if we close a specific building, we might have to repay the state of Connecticut for some of the money that we received. That factors into it. Other factors are the impact on the community at large and the impact on the neighborhood community. And the question obviously there is, what impact would a closing of a school have upon the desirability of homes in a given neighborhood, and does that impact the assessed value of the homes, the prices of the homes, basically? So those are all other factors in addition to enrollment that we had to consider, and we spent a lot of time talking about them. As Sue has described, I think the important thing that came out of all the work that was done is that we now have a pretty reliable methodology, and we need to keep using that methodology to keep testing where we're at as enrollments change. At this stage, you know, we really don't know what the future holds beyond about 5 years. As fairly unpredictable. So I think the best option, and I agree with the conclusion of the task force, the best option is let's use this methodology that we feel comfortable with. It might need to be tweaked. We understand that. Let's use it to test what's going on, maybe every year, at least every year, maybe every several times during the year. And we're going to have to keep monitoring this. It's changing, and we just have to keep testing for it. So, Tara, there's
I think it was a great, we've been working on this stuff a long time. It's an excellent committee. Everyone is willing to think outside the box, think about more questions, more aspects that we need to be aware of, and as a whole community, and not just any specifics, but we need to, so a lot of questions were answered, a lot of thoughts were put into this, and I think the outcome has been very positive, and I think the schools are benefiting from the lack of ancient modulars, first and foremost. And I think that it just keeps our communities healthy, and it keeps our school districts healthy, and I think it's the right, it's a great path, it's a great methodology, and I think it's working.
I would just add that, it was, coming up with the methodology was interesting. It was looked at from every which way. We took, the total number of kids in the district and divided that. We did it in a number of ways. And because you had so much input from so many different people, from so many different areas of town, it really brought about great conversation. And yeah, I agree that it's something we certainly are going to revisit, and it's great to keep the task force in force. But at this point, I think the recommendation is the right one.
So can I ask a question about the recommendation? So the recommendation is basically done in 14, but specifically you guys were looking at 18, 19? Kind of as the potential implementation of any sort of change.
Right.
Yes.
Right?
That's when the enrollment kind of flattens out at the elementary level?
Right, so when I hear you guys say, hey, we're going to look at this next year, what does that mean? Does that mean all of a sudden everything slides a year? Everything slides a year, or are you still looking at 18, 19
no,
in a year?
Everything has to slide a year.
Yes, you go 5 years out.
Okay.
Yeah. I think we're fairly convinced that the data doesn't get or isn't very reliable beyond 5 years. And there are two schools of thought, maybe three, but the two that we focused on was it's either flat and stays flat, or it continues to come back up. And I think the NASDAQ folks have made the case that in past cycles, it tends to come back up.
It's a cycle. Right.
So I think we need to see what starts to happen. We've had roughly 6 years of fairly low enrollment at K-1 levels. Is that the new normal, so to speak, or are we going to see that come back up at some point? So it's just going to keep moving, I would think, over time.
What do we think the number on the downward side is where this changes?
Interesting question. That came up, we talked a little bit about the work that's going on in Glastonbury right now, where they had come forward with a proposal for a school closure, looked at the complexities of the projection. We're asked to kind of go back and identify kind of a trigger number that would reopen the conversation in official capacity. That conversation came up as something we could continue to look at and monitor. We don't have an exact number right now.
I get it. But if
the way that we've, Mike, looked at, essentially you would take one school, say of 400 students, and then you push back into the open capacity of other schools. I mean, we really, created kind of a clean way to look at that. I mean, one thing would be, hey, does more than one school become an option to have a conversation about? Maybe a flat line number to take a look at. I don't have an exact answer for that. I think it would require a little more analysis on our.
I think it's, we're averaging, the last few years at the elementary levels, we're averaging around 260
That's correct.
students coming in.
Right.
If we were to drop, say, 50 students off of that, and that drop stayed for a period of time, over a period of 5 years, that's going to mean a drop overall in the elementary enrollment of about 250 kids.
Right.
Now the question becomes very...
Right, and that's like, I mean, is there you can plot a line, it goes like this, it goes like this, it goes, which line is it when you go, we're on that glide path now.
If our enrollment average dropped down to 200 at the elementary level and stayed there for a period of time, then we've got a
Yeah. he
Well,
was,
yeah, but
several other
and
cities.
what we realized when people were saying is there a drop dead number, there isn't, because the methodology has proven that there's so many pieces to the pie that you really need all the moving parts to be in one category before we even contemplate a number that's it.
Yeah, no, I'm not espousing that there's that number. I'm just saying it. At a certain point, if it continues the way it's continuing, we're going to face that reality of someone saying, "Hey, you've dropped. You're still dropping." This
Right.
this is back on the table. I'm just, do we have a sense of where that is?
That's the question. I don't think that what we're seeing at the enrollment in the elementary schools is that we've seemed to have taken that bite, it's dropped, and now it's sort of stabilized around 260 a year. If we fall off from that, any significant amount, and stays there, then I think there's no question we've got a big decision.
And we're keeping the task force in place because of
Just that.
Just that reason, we
to
want to keep
monitor it.
reviewing.
Okay.
And I think, that definitely is something we all talked about, just to kind of keep tabs on
Yeah.
where that is. And you have to remember, it's only going to be reliable once the kids are born. So we need that to happen too.
How do you keep the task force in place? Do you just meet once a year, or?
Yeah, I think probably we'll end up meeting twice a year. I would expect spring and fall. And the membership may change as it needs to, but I think hopefully we just stay with the methodology and tweak it as we come in with new numbers or as we get better information or new information. And
We'll definitely need to come back this year to look at the official kind of modular removal plan at Central to make sure we'll be able to move forward with that or not, and then bring that back to the board for discussion.
Along these lines, did you all meet with the Board of Finance long-range planning group yet?
no. Well, we haven't been told of a meeting date or anything at this stage, so we're on standby for the time being. And budget season's right around the corner, so
I know. That's why I was
we'll
wondering.
have lots of meetings.
Okay.
Other questions? All set? Public audience? I'm sorry?
May I?
You may. Just give us your name and address, please, for the record.
It's on.
It's on. Okay, great. My name is Ken Krajewski. I am a Hartford resident. I am an attorney and a member of the Connecticut State Bar. I live at 6A Atwood Street in Hartford, Connecticut, and I understand that I am not a Simsbury resident, but I come here with a matter of concern. In 1998 and 1999, I was a reporter at the Hartford Advocate, shortly before the Advocate was purchased by the Current. I covered a story here in Simsbury that actually cost me my job at the Hartford Advocate. I wrote about how football coach Joe Grace whacked Daryl Heagney upside the head and made his mouthpiece come straight out of his mouth. And it was on video camera, and it was broadcast on TV. And we were met with resistance that we've seen in places like Steubenville, Ohio, and Sayersville, New Jersey. And years later, it's come to show that coaches, like the basketball coach at Rutgers University, who threw basketballs at students, got fired. Coaches who have abusive tactics should not be around children of any age, whether they're in college or high school. And I understand that Coach Grace's style has been described as one that he uses jousting to get people amped for events, but I'm disturbed to understand that Coach Grace is back on the sidelines. And I just want you guys to know, my father was a high school football coach. I grew up around a coach, and I understand how coaches motivate players. But I do not think that, even though 15 years has passed since this incident, that a tiger of this stripe will change their stripes. And so I come here this afternoon or this evening to simply say, please reconsider Simsbury Board of Education's hiring of Coach Grace on the sidelines. This is, the town in New Jersey, Sayersville, just shut down their football program because of excessive abuse for players that was condoned by coaches. And I don't think Simsbury has the steroid use and hazing that was going on in Sayersville, or the rape crisis that was happening in Steubenville, Ohio. But we cannot continue to give deference to sports programs. We're a sports insane country, and we have to recognize that we should not be giving deference to football coaches after they have demonstrated an inability to act like normal human beings on the sidelines who understand the value of youth development. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We appreciate you taking the time to come out and speak to us tonight.
You're welcome. Thank you
Anyone
for
else
listening.
from the public audience? Hearing none. Future business, the next Board of Education meeting is Tuesday, October 28th, here in the conference room. Once again, we'd like to thank Simsbury Community Television and all their volunteers for their hard work in helping broadcast these meetings to the folks in the town of Simsbury. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.